Yeah, I know. I'm just going to plug into the matrix here real quick. Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Michiel. My name is Thravan, and I am a researcher at Harvard Medical School. And today I wanted to talk to everyone about my perspective on neuroscience and its growth in the public sphere and how I think it'll apply to the field of marketing. Now, I'm sure you're all wondering what the hell is going on in my head, but I promise we'll get to that shortly. In this talk, I want to take you on a journey through some of my past experiences in the field, how I ended up here, and my conclusions about the future. There's a lot of research out there that I think is drastically going to change not only the way we interact with one another, but also how we fundamentally communicate with each other. It's really an honor to be speaking on such a stage like this. And to be honest, I'd never thought I'd do it wearing cat ears like this. So let's get started at this point. Clicker. Okay. So a few years ago, a company called NeuroWare, they introduced something called the NECO-MeMe brainwave cat ears, which is what I'm essentially wearing right now. The brain produces a lot of electrical activity, and this was basically a simple device that picked up on this activity. Using essentially what was a consumer-grade EEG chip, NECO-MeMe would convert some of the electrical impulses from synaptic activity in a user's brain to, basically wiggle around some ears on your head. Now, the way it works is, based on how much activity in your brain, it'll change the ears correspondingly. So, you have, as you can see, if I'm really relaxed, it'll start drooping. They'll be focused on relaxation. Ideally, if everyone in the audience had one of these, I'd hope to see high interest in my talk, right? But, what I really liked about this was the slogan, lead the brainwave expression generation, because in a way, this is really what it's doing, it's a direct expression of, what I'm thinking, how I'm feeling right now. It's almost a look inside someone's mind. But, let's take a look at this mechanism again. Basically, we have data from our brain, electrical activity being sent to a chip, and then this chip is moving cat ears around. So I did some Googling, and I found out that this chip basically converts all of this complex neural data from your brain into just a value from 1 to 100, right? So, of course, I bought it, did a little bit of tinkering with it, and eventually I realized that there's a lot I could do with this, So I'm going to do a quick demonstration now. So you'll have to bear with me as I plug in for a moment, where I'm going to try using my brain, essentially, by focusing my attention levels to make this, this NECO-MeMe play some music for you guys. So. All right, plugged in. Ooh. And then, let's see if I can get it. Struggling a bit. There we go. Oh. There we go. Okay. So, didn't go as planned, but essentially, I hope you got the idea that essentially, I could use this brainwave chip to play some music for the audience. Now, if you think about it, this is basically just a computer, and you could do this to do more than just play music or be a toy. With this chip, there's so many different possibilities. You could use it to control prosthetic limbs. wheelchairs for the disabled. You could use it to turn on the lights in your home, you know. Rather than something like Alexa, you could just think about doing all of these things and they would work. So my original goal with this project was actually to control this presentation with my brain. And I tried it at home, but as you can see, you know, this is a good like demonstration of what it looked like, you know. I found out it's pretty hard to control your attention and relaxation levels while on stage. So I wasn't able to control the presentation with my mind. But anyways, my whole point with this presentation was just to show you that, you know, neuroscience isn't something that's done only in like high-tech research labs and big government institutions around the world. Not anymore. It's really started creeping into the public sphere and our everyday lives. I guess I wanted to say that, you know, neuroscience is really here. The technology is out there and it's pretty cheap to use, you know. This device, I made it at home for under $200. And it's essentially what is a fully functioning brain control device. And I'm sure with industry backing, like much better and like functioning devices could be sold for much less. So going forward in this talk, I want to talk to you a little bit about the potential of neuroscience, some of the hurdles that we have to overcome, and what the future holds, you know. So let's get started. My earliest introduction into this field was in my social cognitive neuroscience lab at Ohio State University. So all of my research here was focused around getting participants to perform these tasks in giant fMRI machines. So you can essentially think of these as big brain scanners, right? A normal study would essentially have you put into the brain scanner while you're watching a movie, and the scanner would pick up which parts of your brain would light up and like would be active while you're doing a certain task. So the end result would be these maps, somewhat like these, that tell us like, okay, you know, during hand movement, you know, these are the parts of the brain that light up. One of the coolest studies that I did in this lab was the Chinese acculturation study published 4 years ago. Ohio State has a large international Chinese student population. And we took some of these students that had been in the United States less than a month and had them take a survey that tested their individualist versus collectivist values. You could think of it as their Easternness versus their Westernness, right? You know, there were differences, and based on the results of this survey, we divided our group into two populations, one that were more American or Western or had more individualist values, and one that were a bit more Chinese, that had more like, I guess, collectivist Eastern values, right? We scanned their brains, you know, like to like, get a baseline of that data, and, you know, we waited for 6 months for them to essentially, you know, live in the US, you know, take some of these values, you know, like soak in the Americanness. And 6 months later, you know, we scanned them again. And we found out that essentially by acclimating to the culture here, you know, there were significant differences in their medial prefrontal cortexes and posterior cingulate cortexes based on whether they became more Western or Eastern, right? Now, I know I had said a lot of mumbo jumbo, so to simplify things, you know, we were able to group together and see differences in brain structure over the course of just 6 months based on whether students became more Eastern or Western, you know. And this is a pretty cool finding on its own, right? But we have these initial scans, and we know that, you know, brains like that over a course of time start to Westernize, you know, and like brains looking like that over a certain course of time to start to Easternize. But, you know, we thought, what if we could do this the other way, you know? Could we take this data, feed it into an algorithm, and have it predict these changes via machine learning, you know? So basically, you could have somebody sitting in China. I could scan their brain and tell them, hey, based on your brain structure, I don't think that you're going to fit in culturally within the US, right? So we haven't done this yet. We're working on it, but with time, you know, we could probably show something. But anyways, research like this is what really got me into the idea of like social neuroscience and cultural neuroscience. But it wasn't really until I started my own independent project that I understood just how profound this work could be. But always, you know, research is limited by funding. So with the tools I had at hand, and help from my mentors, I decided to study transportability. Now, what does that mean? What is transportability? It's basically, I was trying to measure how, quote unquote, transported someone becomes while watching a movie, or, how people get lost in narratives, while you're, when you're watching your favorite TV show, or, I don't know, listening to a wonderful talk like this. I wanted to see how people get transported and, almost, lose themselves in the narrative of a piece. And I was wondering if, this transportation would be modulated by emotion, aka more emotion equals more transportation. So the reason I chose to start doing this was also because of Study Forest, which is a giant public access neurorepository of brain data that anyone can access. So, why Study Forest? Basically, it's all based on the movie Forrest Gump. The neuroimaging community realized that if we all scan people using the same movie, we could compare data across, labs that are around the world. So, there's angiogram data, cardiac respiration stuff, all of this stuff. So when I did my research study, I realized that, if I just have somebody sit in a scanner and watch Forrest Gump, I could compare all of my data to things that people had done all across the world. So prior research in the field has shown how during movie watching, engaging classroom lectures, things like that, brain activity becomes synchronized among individuals, and neural correlates start showing similar patterns and wavelengths. AKA our brains start to, have a shared wavelength when we're, doing something engaging. And I realized that, I can use this to pretty much study transportability even more. And my solution to do this was through a passive grip test. Because it's very hard to tease out these subtle differences in, with something like transportability, it's a very subtle thing. It's hard to measure using traditional means, so you have to find these clever experiments to tease out these subtle differences. So my idea with this grip test was that during really boring parts of the movie, at the very beginning when things are going difficult, they're setting up the plot, people would remember to really grip the thing hard. I would tell my participants please hold this, grip this little device that I've given you quite hard. But when they started getting more engaged and started losing themselves in the narrative of the movie, and they would kind of forget, and that grip would start loosening a bit. So, I think for obvious reasons, later on in the study, I got contacted by Netflix and Amazon, which somehow found out about our research. And, they basically wanted to make their audience use this idea of transportability to make their audiences go from watching their TV shows like this to watching them like this. So at this point, I've shown you some of my academic research in social neuroscience, but I wanted to now move on to showing you how neuroscience and neuromarketing really is much more widespread and affects our daily lives more than you think. So baked lays, right? We've all seen it, but actually hundreds of thousands of dollars were actually spent on the design of this one bag. The mate finish, the typography, all were targeted at getting women actually to eat more chips. They found out that women are more health conscious when it comes to fast food and stuff. I don't think that's a big surprise. But the new bags were designed to not trigger guilt reactions by avoiding the look of traditional chip bags, and instead featuring healthy ingredients and more aesthetic designs. The Weather Channel. They used EEGs, skin response tests, eye tracking, to measure different viewer reactions to various promotional pitches online. And to provide a more popular example, Daimler, the auto giant behind Mercedes-Benz vehicles, they spend even more money on changing the design of their car headlights to have a more humanistic appeal. So what you have here is eye tracking data showing where people are looking at the most when they see an image. And to give you an idea of how much effort is being put into this, I wanted to show you one of their videos that they have produced. So what you can see here is there's some eye tracking going on. They're studying emotional valence, attention, equipment, like all kinds of different things.
Sorry. Sorry.
All right. So at this point, I've talked about neuroscience in academia, neuromarketing in big industries, right? But now I want to talk more about neuroscience and specifically neural data and interfaces that are entering the public sphere. Right now, the biggest player that's opened the doors for neuroscience to the general public is Neuralink, actually. So if you don't know, Neuralink is one of the brainchild companies of Elon Musk. And essentially what it aims to do is create a human brain-machine interface by implanting electrodes into a person's brain, like surgically, right? So actually a few months ago, before this talk, they published a paper showing how they successfully had created this robotic surgical device that was able to implant these electrodes into a rat brain. It's incredibly interesting, but you're probably wondering, why is this such a big deal? So what's really cool about this? And the reason like a lot of neuroscientists are really freaking out about this is because we've gotten very good at reading signals from the brain. I've shown you fMRIs. I've shown you this cat ear, like EEGs. There's many we have various ways to get information from the brain. We can read signals from the brain pretty well, but what's revolutionary is Neuralink will allow us to send signals to the brain. And that really is the future of like neural interfaces. This is the game changer that has been brought to the table very recently. So let's take the example of a photographer sitting on top of a hill, right? Normally he would take a photo, and he would send this photo to me over the internet, and I could view it on my phone, my tablet, my laptop, and it'd be a high-resolution image. And the visual information that he sees is conveyed. But it only really captures a fraction of this photographer's experience. So information from all of his senses are being converted to electrochemical signals in his brain. With a future brain-machine interface, all of that electrical data could be picked up by electrodes sent over the internet directly to my brain implant. And my implant could then recreate those signals that it sent and basically pulse my brain and create the exact same thing that he's seeing. So I wouldn't see a photograph. I would literally see what he was seeing. And beyond that, I would the signals from his brain for smell, taste, muscle fatigue, all of that, emotion would all be conveyed. It's a much more complete experience that I'm getting. So again, let's look at language with neural interfaces, right? Currently, when we communicate, language as a tool of communication is tens of thousands of years old, right? At any given moment, we have all of these thoughts, ideas, emotions, and feelings in our head. But to communicate them, we lose a lot of time and information. We're converting everything we're thinking into language. And then we're taking this language and then taking more time to type it out or spend it write an email, things like that. And there's all of this time and information loss. Generally what I'm trying to say is that the speed of thought is much slower compared to the speed of language and typing. But with future neural interfaces, we can bypass all of that and go from an era of indirect brain communication to direct brain-to-brain communication, right? Information and education could change drastically. Having a device in your head that's connected to the internet, you could Google everything you want in your head. And when for memory retrieval, it takes time to remember things and access information from our brains. But once processing speeds get faster, with a neural interface, you could think about Googling something and get the answer back so fast, you wouldn't really be able to distinguish whether you actually remembered that or you looked it up online and got the information already. Kind of scary to think about. We can even conquer hunger and sleep. you gotta wake up early tomorrow, tell your interface to increase your melatonin levels at around 10 p.m. so you fall asleep quicker. Or if you're skipping lunch to go to some important meeting, you could tell your interface to decrease your ghrelin levels in your brain so that you don't feel very hungry. We've potentially like conquered our perception of reality. And this is the potential that neural interfaces have. Now, I'm not saying that this is what we'll all be looking like in the next 30 to 40 years. But it is important to realize that the potential at hand is enormous. So, I've just described all of these incredible technological advancements and the promising future in sight. There are many ways all of this could go wrong, many, many ways. So, how can we reach this utopia? Besides the technological, what are some of the societal hurdles that we need to overcome, and how can we do it? For the final leg of the journey, I want to talk about fear, the Frankenstein factor, and the synthetic new generation, which I am a part of. Throughout my talk, I've stressed that neuroscience is moving into the public sphere, but unfortunately, the public has met this with a lot of, fear and, distrust almost. A study done by the Pew Research Center showed, they asked people about, different kinds of human enhancements and augmentations, and it actually found that, the public expresses more worry about gene editing babies and synthetic blood, but they express the most worry about brain chip implants, So the question is, why did this happen? How did, brain-machine interfaces and neuroscience in the public get such a bad reputation? Why are people scared of it? And I think, part of it has to do with, media portrayal, shows featuring neural augmentation like Black Mirror, Westworld, The Matrix, so to speak, they all explore these creepy, terrifying prospects of neural enhancement. Neuroscience is depicted in the light of mind control and becoming these unfeeling cyborgs. And there are companies that are still trying to show people the positives and benefits of neural augmentation. That's what NeuroWare was trying to do. You might actually recognize Dr. Greg Gage from his TED Talk about trying to control someone else's arm with your brain. And he started a company called Backyard Brains, which was his attempt was to bring neuroscience to a younger audience and make it publicly available for everyone. Now, to me, as a neuroscientist, I think his projects were very, very cool. But I can see how some of his stuff could, it wouldn't inspire trust in the public perception of neuroscience. For example, he had a Robo-Roach bundle where essentially you could do surgery to attach this little chip to a cockroach. Cockroaches have extraordinarily simple neural systems, and you could connect it with your smartphone and essentially control it like this. Yeah. Yeah, so you could create a little cyborg cockroach that you can control with your smartphone. Okay, so I totally get it. For my next demonstration, I'm going to bring out some cockroaches. So I understand the fear of this technology of becoming these unfeeling cyborgs and really getting undermined by machines. A lot of speakers have expressed concerns about taking humans out of the utopia and letting us become the own subtext of our own future. But the thing is, to a neuroscientist, we're already cyborgs, and I don't think that this is generally a bad thing. Look at cochlear implants, for example. They've enabled more than 40,000 adults to hear again and 20,000 children to develop language at rates comparable to children with normal hearing. We have deep brain stimulation, where we essentially insert a giant electrode into somebody's brain. And this has helped people with Parkinson's take back control of their lives. This is a picture of Matt Eagles. He is one of the youngest documented diagnosis cases for Parkinson's, with symptoms appearing when he was just 7 years old. And with this deep brain stimulation implant, he's been able to live for quite a while and function normally as an adult. And to be honest, I bet none of you could function without your cell phones either. It doesn't feel like something cybernetic because it's not physically attached to us, but they essentially act as our own personal external processing units and memory banks doing tasks for us that we don't normally do. And for some everyday neural enhancements, you change your very perception of reality with the coffee that you had this morning because it makes you feel more awake, stimulates your brain, like blocks out the sensations of fatigue. And also the ibuprofen you're probably going to need after this talk. Yeah, so all of these are they all affect our brain and subsequently our perception of reality. So again, like to neuroscientists, I don't see augmenting our brains as a very foreign or Frankenstein-esque concept. In the past we've seen organ transplants, LASIK surgery, all of that. They're met with huge fears from the public, but they've quickly been accepted. So if you're worried about surveillance capitalism, about humans becoming footnotes, or the insurmountable threats of AI, you're very right to be worried. These are all big threats. But I don't think that we're going to surrender to technology or our AI overlords. I think we can merge with them to become something more. Now I understand. I think it's safe to say that I am the youngest person in this room. And speaking on a stage where everyone's so experienced, I know I might look like this to you all right now. I am naive, I'm optimistic, I'm determined to change the world, and I'm everything that the synthetic generation is supposed to stand for. But if you're having trouble believing in my words, of somebody so young, here's a few established neuroscientists who also share the same view. This is Kafui Zerasa, who, a Duke neuroscientist and neurosurgeon, who also believes that the future of neuroscience is moving to the public sphere. Daniel Amen wants to take fMRI technology and bring it into medical diagnoses in hospitals beyond just this field of research and stuff. I really do think that a utopia is within grasp. So the final question I have for you is, what is your role in this new digital society? And my short answer to this is just trust. The molecule on the screen, it's oxytocin, and the brain basically registers oxytocin as the trust hormone. There's been a lot of scientific studies that's shown how, something that we already really knew, that trust equals better business value, better productivity, and overall happiness in corporations. I wanted to examine trust in the new generation. I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to wrap this up quickly. Sogeti published a report on the synthetic generation where they mentioned digital happiness. We're described as strange, abnormal, seeing fake as real, and all of that stuff, the crazy stuff at the start of the video yesterday. The perception of our generation is pretty clear in this report. While there are brilliant insights shown, it really does speak to a lack of trust in our generation. There's been a decentralization, if not of power, but a decentralization of trust. We don't trust corporations and big companies. We trust each other now. And I really don't need to explain this because I'm sure you all know. Before I conclude, I just wanted to acknowledge Michiel for giving me the opportunity to really speak up here, and my dad for being a part of this organization, having faith in me to give this talk. I also wanted to acknowledge Garrett Carter, who works at the Innovation Hub at Ohio State and helped me design the cat ear interface that I had made, and Sophia Letcher and Francesca for the biorender images and help with the PowerPoint. In closing, as many other speakers already said, we're at the beginning of many huge radical changes in our society. So I ask you, the older generation, to give us the tools, the knowledge, and expertise you've built up over your careers. But engage with our abnormality, have faith in us and the things we find important. And ultimately, trust us to build the future. Thank you.